Well, hello and welcome everyone. We've got another exciting partner webinar focused event for in-store for everyone today. Brought to you by JumpCloud. My name's Shirley. I'm an MSP sales manager here on our North American teams. And joining me today are two fantastic guests. A partner of ours, Megan Fulton, COO and founder of VioletX. And joining us as a subject matter expert, our very own CISO for JumpCloud, none other than Fred Wilmot. Say hi, guys.
Everybody.
Hey.
Fantastic. So I just want to point out that this is an interactive session. So before we begin, I just want to remind everybody that's listening to take advantage of the chat feature. We want to hear your questions. We want to hear your comments. I'll be doing my best to weave those thoughts into today's conversation. And if I don't hear from you, we'll definitely have a point at the end of this to dive into a little bit more Q&A focused activity. So again, just a reminder, we definitely want you to be a part of this webinar series. We look forward to hearing from you guys in just a little bit. I think before we get going, let's just talk about what's going to be by the time we get to the end of this webinar. My goal is that for everyone in attendance gains insight into how to leverage their security offering as a branding strategy. And certainly with Megan joining us today, I think we have some valuable insights and stories to share with everybody. I would also like them to walk away with valuable lessons from subject matter experts that are going to prevent them from making the common mistake and put them on a track for ultimate success. And if we can, by the end, put them in a position not only to grow their client base, but accelerate that business growth. How does that sound to everybody? Awesome. Well, I tell you what, let's go ahead and get things kicked off. Again, my name's Charlie, and joining me again today, Megan Fulton, founder and COO of VioletX, Fred Wilmot, CISO of JumpCloud. Before we get into today's agenda, Megan, would you mind just introducing yourself and a little bit about VioletX?
Sure. Hey, I'm Megan. I founded a company called VioletX. I am technically the CEO, but we still have a team of between 10 and 20, so I call myself the COO because I operate our business. So I think it makes it easy for our customers and people approaching the company to know the type of topics that they can bring to me, which is operating issues, sales problems, product problems, and things like that. I started the company about 2 years ago. And my background, IBM. I started my first tech job in data and analytics at IBM, and then I met some of my co-founders working there. They have a great cybersecurity program for Fortune 500 companies, some 1,000s, and I had a great time learning about tech there in my early 20s. And that's where I got the idea that someday I would love to start my own company. And so, like 2 years ago, I made the move and did start a company. And since then, we are bootstrapped, profitable, and building our own technology. And we have about a near 100% renewal rate. So that's the vantage point I'm coming from, is the founder of a virtual CISO company that specializes in high growth SaaS companies that's profitable and finding success.
Wonderful. Thank you, Megan. I know that your stories and the insights that you've gained from your journey with VioletX are going to be 100% applicable to our audience today. And how great is it to have, the ability to create a virtual CISO offering. We also have Fred Wilmot, an actual CISO in the flesh.
Hey, everybody. I think from the standpoint of relevant background here, we spent a lot of time advising service providers. I've run a couple in the level of importance and criticality of what people entrust service providers with is something we're super familiar with. As you know, we offer a service to our customers. We obviously use our own service in that same capacity. So I'm super close to some of the things we're going to talk about today and happy to help.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I just want to recognize there's been a few comments about our audio quality. Guys, we'll do our best to make sure that everything is coming through cleanly and clearly. So just want to recognize, I hear your feedback. We'll see if we can't clean up for you and get that sorted out. But in an effort to make sure that this time is valuable and we stay on schedule, let's go ahead and just dive into today's agenda. So today, what we'll be reviewing is we'll kick off today's conversation starting with security as both a protocol, but also a branding strategy, and how that can really fuel both your business growth and also play into your client attraction strategy. Then we will talk about the role that clients play in purchasing decisions. We don't operate in a vacuum. We have to think client first. And so this is where we can dive into some lessons learned and some valuable insights from both Megan and Fred and their professional journey that can be applicable to everybody. We'll talk about consolidating security tools to ultimately reduce attack vectors, but also some ancillary benefits through consolidation as well. And then lastly, we'll be talking about what to look for in the vendors you work with, how to evaluate a new partner. You know, between Megan and Fred, I'm sure they have several stories that they can share about things that went right and things that, well, maybe didn't go so right. All valuable lessons that we can pass along to our audience and our partners today. Then we'll get everybody pointed in the right direction with some valuable resources that come up from today's conversation. And if we still have some time, we'll allow a little bit of discussion for live Q&A. How does that sound to everybody? Excellent. Well, let's go ahead and just get things kicked off in the beginning of it, you know, a good place to start. Megan, curious to hear your thoughts on security as both a protocol, you know, a primary offering, but also how that has played a role in your branding strategy for VioletX.
Yeah, so how I look at security as it applies to branding, the first thing is taking a few steps back before jumping into market trends and looking at the fundamentals of how customers buy security. So typically when a customer is going out to buy security, they may be looking for IT administration, they may be looking for data privacy, they may be looking for compliance, or they may be looking for aspects of cybersecurity. And so it's really good to know that a customer may call any of those four things security. And it's also good when you're looking at what you want to offer that even hearing those lists, there's a lot of different projects and jobs to be done across all of those topics. So you're probably, to do a great job, going to want to narrow into, of those things, how much of each are you going to offer and what is your blend? That's going to really determine the perfect set of customers for you and make it really easy to serve those customers. And so when I look at security as a protocol and a branding strategy, the first thing to do is to acknowledge yourself, all the things that security can be, and then choose the things you want to be good at. And that's something that's been really successful for us building a virtual CISO business, is determining, okay, this is sort of what our customer set ideally will look like. These are the people that we want to love VioletX. So these are the things that we're going to offer and offer really well. And that really helped us to stay focused on operating the business as well as attracting the right customers and making them happy.
Fantastic. I think what I'm learning and hearing from you, Megan, is that this isn't something that just happens overnight, but through careful consideration and really taking the time to understand both your own capabilities and your own limitations, but also the needs of your customers, really kind of that confluence of data and insight is what leads to what sounds like a really compelling branding strategy and a growth strategy for VioletX. Would you agree?
Yes, and I think the hardest thing about this exercise is even our own belief of what security is. So when we were starting, we even had to stop and make some decisions about what we were going to say security is, because it can really be so many things. And so one of the things that we did that's a really practical tip, I read all of SOC 2, I read all of NIST, I read all of these different frameworks, and then we talked to companies. And through that, we figured out which way are we going to lean? Do we really want to focus on compliance? Do we want to be that really traditional CISO that loves NIST and other frameworks? Are we going to partner with people like JumpCloud and do IT administration as well? But we had to take that time to really sort those things out and figure out, of the customers that we desired to work with, which were really cool, really high growing SaaS companies, what was it that we were going to offer from these different options that we were going to enjoy doing and they were going to need. So yeah, like looking through the actual frameworks was a great first step.
Fantastic. I think you raise a really what might sound like an elementary question, but is a fascinating topic to discuss. What is security? Fred, do you have kind of your principles and thoughts on what exactly is security when people try to attempt to define it?
Yeah, that's obviously a massive, massive thing. I think the way we might care about it as a customer is that we care about what's the risk, really. Security is just a byproduct of a thing to mitigate your risk, really. And when we consider what our business is and what we do, then we're probably considering the threat vectors to that business. And then we're probably considering, like Megan described, some of the things that are really critical to understand are, what is my business good at? What do I have tooling for? What do I have people hired that have skill sets that are capable of doing? And where I don't have those gaps, or where I don't have those services or don't have those capabilities, I need to get those capabilities in some capacity or another. So I can either mitigate that risk or transfer it to someone else that knows what they're doing and can solve these problems for us. But just like Megan described, I think the critical moment of understanding what you want to provide as a service provider, it's the same on the other side of the table, which is you absolutely have to understand what it is you're looking for when you go looking for a service provider. You have to be very transparent about what your capabilities are and what they aren't. That's how you get where you want to get to with results from risk mitigation. And it's a little different than sort of trying to secure the world. That empirical philosophy is great, but practical execution impossible. So this is a good way to start to take away some of the incremental risks as we see our businesses grow in whatever capacity, and also a formula way for us to do that with some sort of plannable method as opposed to reactive because something happened to you.
Absolutely. And so by taking that time to not only evaluate your own capabilities and your own limitations, to evaluate the tools that you're familiar with, but also the ones that you're not, I think that starts to be the framework, or at least the first step, the foundation in being able to start to articulate, well, what exactly am I confident going to market with so that I can offer to my customers and to my future clients? Megan, do you have any specific stories that come to mind when you think about the early days of VioletX and how you guys were evaluating tools to bring to market?
Yeah, that's a huge part of our growth story. So when we started out, we were some colleagues that had worked together with a security and data background, and we wanted to start a security company. And this was probably our first question we asked. Well, which part? Like, what do we want to do in security? Because you could build so many things, anything. A lot of it would be fun. So we said, who do we want to work with? And we kind of narrowed down. We'd love to sell to founders. And once we decided we wanted to sell to founders, then we needed to go out and figure out what we were going to sell them and how we were going to do it. And so when evaluating tools or figuring out these approaches, we've been through so many demos of the tools on the market. Something I love to do is I go on Crunchbase, I pull up the newest funded security products, and I go get a demo. Because those teams are usually on the cutting edge of something. They've seen things that have already been done and they want to do it better. So it gives us a lot of ideas about what's coming out and what's happening, and also what our customers might hear about. And then we obviously went to the really core technologies that everybody loves and are used to, including products like JumpCloud or CrowdStrike, some of those really stable tools, Okta. I know that's a competitor of yours, but again, we would demo even with them. To make sure that we just know the lay of the land. We want to know everything that our customers have to purchase, and to take a demo of side-by-side competitors, to fill in the blanks of products maybe we didn't use in our past jobs that other people love, and really try to understand underneath amazing marketing or bad marketing, what is the tool and what is it going to do? And is it going to give us time back? Or is it going to really help our customer, and can we measure it? So we've spent a lot of time working on that, and we continue to do that because we want to stay innovative, and we know our customers don't have time to demo IT and security products. And so, yeah, we're constantly doing that and constantly trying to figure out what are the value and what are the real segments that these products fall in, what are the jobs to be done, and how do they solve them? So probably a long answer to your question because it's such a big thing to do. I think probably everyone on this call finds security tooling very overwhelming, the number of options, getting under the marketing, understanding what you're being demoed sometimes, like, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? And I think my answer to that too is, and Fred can jump in on his experience, but I think we're all in the same boat trying to figure that out. And we found success with it. And I think that if you create some sort of approach where you're focusing first on jobs to be done and tools and relationships with those partners second, it's going to make things simpler.
I think we all like simple, right? Simple, clear, concise, right? That's something we can all relate to. Absolutely. I do want to come back to the conversation around client value or client needs as it relates to tool evaluation or partnership evaluation. But because we've got that coming up on our agenda, I do want to take a moment to just let's hone in on the role that our clients play in our not only our vendor selection, our tool selection, our completion or improvement of our tech stack. We know that every tech stack needs to be highly defensible and dependable. But how do you assess new tools before committing to integrating them? You mentioned going to Crunchbase and being on the cutting edge, but is there also value in revisiting maybe previous tools or systems that may have gone through accelerated advancement or improvement?
I think that's, and Fred could agree, as a purchaser at a really successful and large startup, that is equally difficult as it is to keep up with the new innovation, is seeing how larger companies or established companies continue to progress and develop. And I use Crunchbase and I use Hacker News and TechCrunch. I use the news a lot, actually, to keep reading up on where these companies are going, because it can be hard. Even if I were to go to the JumpCloud website, you guys offer so much and you do so much. And actually, when I work really close with your team can show me so much that you do that it can get very overwhelming to really understand everything a company is doing. So I love to read about pivots that companies make. I like to hear about their year-over-year growth. Like I know with CrowdStrike, someone had mentioned, I think that they have doubled their growth in the past year. And so that gives me cause to say, okay, why are people buying this product? You know, what has happened that such an established brand is able to continue to grow and have these numbers? And then I can dig a little bit deeper into that. I think similarly, calling and taking a demo to me is such a shortcut. Number one, you understand when you talk to their sales reps how motivated they are to improve. I've called some really big companies and the sales reps kind of lost their edge, like some of them. And at small companies, sales reps can also lose their edge. But when you talk to sales reps, you get a sense of what's going on inside the company, how excited the sellers are about their product. I've been a seller at a tech company, so I can feel that pulse. Are these sellers loving this product, or is this a job? And so that's something that I try to get a sense of. Are people passionate? And then about what? I'll ask sellers at the company, what's the hottest, coolest thing your company's doing right now? Because I want to hear what they're excited about from being a seller before. When I worked at SAS, for example, SaaS, I knew exactly what our hottest products were, and I was pumped. I believed in those products. So I think the conversation with the salespeople is really important, even sometimes more important than the actual product demo. And then I will always take the demo and bring someone, the most technical person on my team, to that demo so that they can validate that what people are telling me a product does is being correctly executed, so that we're not passing on any ideas to our customers that aren't the best in security. So after we do the demo, we'll sit and we'll look at our full offering to customers and make sure there's no overlap. This is something that is completely useful and needed, and that the people on my team want to use it. The CISOs want to go into this tool and use it. And then our next step is we'll ask our customers, do any of you have a problem with these tools? Have you had a bad brand experience? Have you used this tool before and you don't like it? And if we get pushback from our customers that they don't like the tool, we'll move on to another vendor or another product until we find what we call universally selected problem and a universally accepted vendor. And that process has really, really helped us to sort through the tools that we'll give a lot of time to and the tools where we really need to move on.
I love that. It's almost like an in-house collaborative effort to create a set of decision criteria and establish a decision process that allows you to evaluate everyone evenly and equally.
Right. I think it's really important to go after a segment of tools as that customer would. So, for example, a lot of our customers need an external penetration test, and we do some penetration testing as a form of maintenance, but we don't do pen testing reports. We think that's really good to have separation of duties between your CISO and your pen tester. And it helps customers to feel like there's more eyes on what's going on, and also helps them to talk to their customers in a way that shows that they have a different auditor, a different pen tester, a different CISO. They have a whole community and a team validating what they're doing. And when we went to go evaluate pen testers, what a big market of really, really talented people. You could probably take a demo of pen testers for a year and write a really great report on what people are doing. And so what we did is we sort of tackled it like a customer, and we had an employee, in this case it was actually me, demo, probably took me 2 or 3 weeks. I was doing back-to-back demos every day of pen test companies, developing a set of criteria through the conversations of what is good pen testing, what's worth the money, what's not worth the money, and then ultimately boiling down to my customers who are looking for a lower cost option that's still quality, they're going to love them. Our customers who want a tool that comes with it and maybe a little more service, or what we deemed as a little bit more value, here's the incremental cost. And then our customers might want a product like Black Hills. There's no tool, but they're just awesome pen testers, and they give you a very traditional report. That's the third option. And so that allowed us to kind of look at every single option, make sort of, here are the tool providers, here are the report providers, and different levels of service and cost. So that when we went to our customers, we said, hey, we talked to 60 people. Here's going to be our 3 of our basics. And that gives our customers a lot of confidence because we did the work they would have done. We did the work that they wished someone did for them. We really went out and talked to everybody and used a cybersecurity background to come to a solution. So that was the process that we used, and it's very efficient. We learn along the way, and then we end up with a framework we can describe to other people. And also sometimes going into it, we don't know what we're looking for, even though we've been in security for a long time. We need the market to re-educate us on what matters. And the market does change, like you mentioned in a question before. Vendors come out with new offerings or trends change, and everyone's pivoting to that trend. And so this approach, I think, was really helpful for me. I felt more educated and could explain to customers what to care about.
I love it. I love it. Now, Fred, I know that you have spent time both recently advising MSPs, but also yourself, managing from that aspect. Curious, what was, when you were in those days in that role, what was your process for evaluating new tools, and how has that evolved to where you are today?
I'll start off with, and it's probably different than Megan's, and I think it's good to hear both dimensions here on how, but I start off with a capability framework. And when we do things like qualitative analysis of a customer's needs or requirements, I want to hear what they do for a business. I want to understand what their threat model looks like. And then I'm going to plug that into a framework of what, in those cases we would offer or what we use in that capacity. Oftentimes, there are 2 schools of thought as to whether or not the customer determines what the tool chain is, because at the end of that seat is somebody doing the analysis work. And if they're not comfortable or new in the tool set, then they're not going to make the same qualitative analysis they would if they were very comfortable with it. So oftentimes you won't find, choosing a stack. It's here's the stack. It covers this set of capabilities. It is this dollar amount per seat for these elements, right? And this is what you get. Historically, that's sort of where you get to. And the benefit maybe isn't the tool chain, it's the analyst behind the tool chain that's doing the work for you. And also the methodology for triage, the service levels and things go behind that. But in order to determine, what role your clients play, for me, it's all about what the customer's needs are, what the customer model looks like, and what they're actually defending against. And prioritize that against the tech stack that you establish or have established, right? So do they, what level of competency or capability, maturity does the company sit at? Does that fit into my portfolio for where I should probably put them or manage them or do something like this? Because at the end, it's a risk reward thing, right? Really high-end services cost more money. Are you fit for that? Is that what you need from the customer perspective? As a service provider, am I catering to, the Crunchbase crew, right? Which is new up and coming, high growth companies, things like this. Or am I catering to somebody that is managing satellite telemetry data, right? Or something like this, launching rockets, for example. In those capacities, right, there are different reasons to do or choose different stacks. And some might say, okay, well, I need a little deeper, granularity into these things. Reporting might be relevant for, audit purposes or compliance purposes to fulfill, something along those obligatory stances. And others might really need, look, that's cool. I'm glad there's a byproduct of me doing security well in these reports, but what I'm actually after is making sure that I don't get woken up in the middle of the night, and I'm also after not being in the papers. So those two things can play a different role. So in assessing products, I think, there's always, just like Megan described, there's an ongoing responsibility to make sure you always have the best products available in the marketplace. And you always have a clear understanding of that transitive value to your customer as a function of that. And it's got to fit into a capability matrix that you ascribe to. So a lot of people, Megan pointed this out earlier, a lot of people historically use a NIST or a MITRE or something along these lines. And when we think about that, the big requirements that drive that is I want to make sure I don't have any gaps. I want to make sure that I cover these areas of detection or response or prevention. And so how do we make sure we cover those bases while we go through the process of managing your security portfolio or your IT portfolio or your anything portfolio? It's actually the same frameworks. So I think that's probably, the advocacy for startups and security providers or service providers is to make sure they have clear defined metrics around what it is they want to walk away with when they present a customer with options. Otherwise, they're not incrementally going to improve themselves, but it's not measurable value for a customer either.
Yeah, I want to jump on what Fred said. He made a really, really good point about frameworks. And I think the market sometimes uses frameworks in different ways. And customers also experience, especially as new to security or new buyers, they experience frameworks in different ways. So I think frameworks, that's a really important conversation of what is a framework supposed to do? And different frameworks really have different end goals. And what I love about what Fred said is he focuses on frameworks that close security gaps. And I think that, to me, that's the best, most efficient way to figure things out, because if you're really closing security gaps, a lot of the other frameworks will flow. If you're really doing great security, it shouldn't be hard to get SOC 2 compliant. If you're doing really great security, you're probably going to put a framework, even like HIPAA or PCI, over the things that you're doing, and you're going to find you're really far down that road of obtaining those different types of qualification certifications. So I love that Fred mentioned that frameworks, first and foremost in his mind, are something to close security gaps, because in our view, that's also what their job is.
Absolutely. And whether you are in person, like Fred, right? Or whether you're a customer or a client of VioletX working with a virtual CISO, you're constantly looking to evaluate potential gaps, or always inviting yourself to take a moment to reflect, over time, have new gaps, kind of revealed themselves that need reevaluation or actually cause for a new discussion. I love that. Let's go ahead and take a step forward here as we start to talk more about, now that we've talked about selecting the right tools, and we've talked about how to create a framework and criteria to evaluate those new tools, Obviously, if you've been in the game for quite some time, you're probably going to start collecting quite the stack. On my sales team, we talk a lot about the MSP's Jenga tower and how inevitably over time it becomes this solution upon solution upon solution. And sometimes that can be really cumbersome and difficult to manage. And so this invites a conversation around consolidation. Megan, do you have any tips or advice for our audience members today about how to approach consolidation and what the advantages would be for going through that exercise?
Well, first, I'm excited for Fred's answer on this because I feel like he'll have a really good one from being a CISO and from working with several MSPs. So I won't take up too much time. I really love his answer. I think this is a really big challenge because tools are exciting. The idea that technology can replace humans and the jobs to be done of humans is exciting inside of a company where you feel overwhelmed and never enough people on your team. And it feels exciting as a service provider because you have the same problem and it's magnified. You have more companies to service and wanting to do more for them all the time and wanting to figure out how to do that really efficiently. So first of all, I think that is probably one of the biggest universal security problems is I don't have enough people, or I wish I had more people. I wish I had someone to do every single tiny part of this. And sometimes tools offer that they can do that. I think with consolidation, first of all, it's figuring out, it's the third point, redundancy and unnecessary. Tools really have to prove their value. And so if something's a dashboard, usually we can kind of kick the dashboard out because we'll make our own dashboards ultimately. We're looking for things that first and foremost, really, like, not to plug JumpCloud, but somebody that has the ability to push controls on customers. That's just such a huge advantage. It's like having a team of 3 or 4 people. They can really solve a lot of problems for you. So, we're looking for things like that. And we're looking for tools ultimately that do more than one thing. And so there's, within the cybersecurity market, there's a lot of venture funding. And so you can get really excited to go super, super, super deep on something, which I also appreciate. And I love those tools. And when you can afford those tools can add a lot of value. But the types of companies we work with, where they're, seed to IPO, their budget is usually, they're going to have maybe a couple $100,000 a year for the whole thing, including hiring and people. And so some of those really awesome, cool, deep products may not be able to make it in unless what Fred mentioned, you're servicing people who have a really niche or unique or highly, highly technical offering where they need that type of capability and service, and they probably know they need the budget to buy them. And so when we're looking at these things, we're looking for first solving basics we cannot do scalably with people, or basics where open source cannot replace what that commercial tool does. Something, I use JumpCloud as an example because we're all on the JumpCloud webinar, so we should all know what it is. My company is not going to be able to rebuild JumpCloud in 12 months and not need to pay for the licenses. It would be too difficult. So you look at, this is not something open source is going to solve, and it does multiple things, and it's stable. So that's kind of how I look at consolidating tools. And there's a lot more to my answer a year from now, because I think we're all trying to really learn about tool consolidation, and it's very complicated because we're kids in a candy store in the cybersecurity market, and there's just so much to buy that some of the discipline is saying no.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's something to suggest that when you look at a framework as the capability maturity for your organization or your service provider's organization, or you as a service provider across your organization for offerings, you have to carefully consider, is this something that you have the skill set to build or the capability to buy? Because support is a real thing. Sustainability is a real thing. And what matters most is what you deliver to your customers, which is a time to respond and a time to remediate. And all these great things around time to detection is great, very valuable, highly critical for us to be able to spend the time that helps us provide the context through our tools lenses as the tool chain to not only prevent things from happening, but to make sure we have the level of observability to detect them. And then obviously the critical moments are making sure that systems don't get compromised, and if they do, there's quick remediation around it. Some of the things that drive that are, I don't need to have 3 different types of EDRs. CrowdStrike does a lot of things, for example, right? CrowdStrike allows you to spend the time looking at not only the detections, it can help you out with vulnerability management on endpoints. It can also give you threat intelligence incorporated into one channel. Also, when you look at sort of the Gartner quadrant, a lot of people spend the time to look at a Gartner quadrant as opposed to get an assessment of, an individual demo. A lot of people demo tools very well, right? That's also sort of the snake oil of the security industry. But oftentimes you don't get to see actually what that tool does, or there's not a reputable background behind it, or many other reasons. And so having some clarity around that is also really instrumental. It may mean that I don't need to get, a specific thing to look at vulnerability analysis if I'm going to do that with CrowdStrike, for example, just as an example. It may mean that I don't need to have a CASB provider and then also a, zero trust provider, and then I have an identity provider, and then I have a, insert other thing here. Because the complexity there in plugging these pieces together means not only you have the sort of complexity or challenge of the security risk of that particular thing, but now you have a trust and an integration, and who knows, right? Those elements of complexity, I think you guys both said this earlier, to keep it simple, principle is a really good one. I want to very clearly understand what my attack surface is, and I want to very clearly continue to diminish it as much as possible. So when we're thinking about that, whether you're a build team, your build tools, like nowadays, build tools are the targets, right? Where I put my code, how I build my code as a function of that, where my artifacts live, all the keys and tokens associated with it. If you're a build team, those things are absolutely critical because the supply side and supply chain attacks are massive today. If I'm shipping malicious software, we've got issues. So when we think about what those things do for us down the stretch, the attack vectors we need to know and understand are the ones we have to plan for. And that's where, the tools reduction and consolidation get us to the frameworks that allow us to have just the stack we need, and one we're very confident in, to make sure we can perform and deliver to our customers what those requirements are.
Yeah, I think, Fred, you're doing a really good job too of explaining that there's slots for tools at the end of the day. And those slots are really determined by jobs to be done, not so much things we wish a tool would do, right? So I love how you're framing up that you have a really good idea of what's going on at your company and what's going to happen at your company, and then what is the risk profile of the things that happen at your company. And then you're going out and you're looking for tools that are going to support you in navigating those things. And I think in some ways we do the same thing with our customers. And I think I mentioned, but we do choose customers that are very similar so that the tools that we choose do work for everybody. And so similar to Fred's process, we also, in the way that I describe it, are doing the same thing that Fred's doing, which is, okay, these are software as a service businesses. The bad guys know the same things we know because they're studying it just like we are, that there's going to be these different points in the life cycle and these different people and these different events. And they know, just like we fear and know when to fear that they're going to attack, they also know when they should. And so we need tools that support us so that we can do our job well.
There's just one more thing to add on to that, Megan, 100%. The process to determine whether or not you should build tools, as opposed to can you build tools, is also critical, right? So oftentimes, the software development lifecycle of an adversary is way faster than mine, right? It has to be, right? Because I have all of these other things to ensure that we build, high quality software and we deliver high quality product as a service with service levels. Adversaries don't care. They don't have that requirement. It has to quote the great Dan Kaminsky, it only has to work once. So in those cases, that's the way to think about it too, from the standpoint of where does, an off-the-shelf product and off-the-shelf value, off-the-shelf supportability with a background behind it, get your vendors together, have them tabletop with you, make sure you have a clear understanding of what the outcomes are going to look like should something interesting happen.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main reasons that I almost always plan to partner for threat. Because I think that people that are building threat tools, that's your A squad in cybersecurity. They have to work really, really well. And so you almost want to buy them from people where threat is their life's work, their life's passion, or they just had like a surely stroke of brilliance and made something awesome. But yeah, always when we talk about things that we're going to partner for, I'm looking for the same thing that Fred's saying. There are some areas where you can spin up cybersecurity tools because they don't have that mission critical function. They may be about building a cybersecurity program, which is what we do and our tools do. But when you're looking at products that have to survive in game time, that is something where really stable tools can help you, because another thing that the bad guys do, they can also do demos, or they can also make sandboxes of products that they purchase and practice hacking them. It's not like they're out there just trying to win the lottery. A lot of them, they're businesses, and they make investments to get in the door, because there's a lot of great money in this. And so that's good to remember too.
Absolutely. I want to bring in a question that just came in from Scott M regarding consolidation. He says, I totally get the appeal and reasoning for consolidating tools, but with security being a layered approach, it can also be an issue if the one tool has any interruptions. How do you navigate potential disruptions or interruptions of service if you do have a centrally located, highly dependable tool in the middle of your tech stack that experiences interruption?
Fred, I'll let you take this because I feel like you're going to have a really good answer.
So I think it's a great question. It's not an either or problem, right? There is a guided scale here, a range scale. And the way to think about it is security is one part of a triangle, right? Integrity and availability are the other two. Most people think about confidentiality for data, sure, but in this particular case, one of the rules are, if you're going to make something a tier 0 or critical service for the business, you support it like it is. So if this is something where you're out shopping a vendor and they don't provide you the level of service in the contract or expectation of that service delivery, don't go with them, especially if it's going to be a jewel, the crown jewel in your crown. The important part behind that is to make sure that what you expect and what your risk is going to be met with the equal amount of service delivery as a result of that. That could be your service uptime for your particular tool set in the SaaS environment is, X, Y, or Z. In some cases, if it's absolutely critical to your business, probably 3 nines, maybe okay, maybe not, right? If it's a streaming service you need to run all day. For security controls, if it's not accessible, what is the impact, right? And measure that. That's where disaster recovery and business continuity have to play a role in your planning for the types of things. So if you define something as being a critical service, you have to treat it like it's critical service. And there will be those. There's no way around this, right? You will have crown jewels that you have to make sure are fundamentally always available, always accessible, highly resilient, and capable of dealing with sustained threat. You could look at this as, I have a website. A website has to have some edge around it. You probably should have some proxies. You probably should think about load balancing. You probably should think about what a CDN looks like in order to sustain that in geographic regions, and to be able to withstand things that have high amplitude of, requests or attempts to exhaust your service or that threat vector, right? So when you think about those kinds of things, you have to treat it for what it is. We can't sort of project that particular tool chain is going to be something that is never going to be subject to anything else. And then to your point, build your layered security around it so that those things don't become very clear and available to somebody to attack.
I love what Fred said. And I think the one thing I'd add to it is, because I love that the conversation about business resiliency, because I think that's an area too that kind of gets blown over, but is maybe the biggest differentiator that an MSSP can have and a company can have, which is things can happen, anomalous can happen. You're up against people that they're as talented as we are, or definitely more talented than I am. So from an MSSP perspective, we started off manually delivering everything. So I always think about what it that we do could we manually deliver if we needed to temporarily do that, and how would we do that? And we also talk to our customers about that. And so we look at it like, what's the levels of failure, right? So you could probably think of the breaches we've seen in the last 6 months. Some of them went really bad because the app got taken out and then they had to turn customers away. And that's not really necessarily what the answer needs to be. Like, a lot of companies can start off with heavy consulting. Maybe they never did, so they don't know how to deliver some of their services that are being delivered via technology with humans at their company, which is very inconvenient to do, but could save customer relationships or allow you to keep operating. So we talk to our customers and to ourselves about, okay, you're going to lose your app, and then you're going to go to email, to phone, to mobile, to landline. Like, what's every single level that a bad actor can take you down until you have to say, all right, I'm temporarily out. And so I think actually knowing what those things are, that gives me a sense of peace as a business owner, and I think it would give, as an internal CISO, your company a sense of peace to think, okay, they could get the app. No matter what, they can possibly get your app, even if you have someone awesome like Fred working for you, even if you bought every single great Gartner product, they can still get the app. What do you do if they get the app? What are some more traditional tools like phones that you can use if they get the app? And what's the point when they've got you?
Fantastic. Thank you, Scott, for the question. I want to invite all of our other attendees. If you do have questions or comments, go ahead and get those into the chat now. We still have about 10 minutes remaining of today's session. So while those comments and questions are coming in, I do want to advance to our next talking point, and then we'll get some more interaction from the audience. You know, we've spent a little bit of time now kind of defining the boxes that need to be checked on our tool, right? So Megan, Fred, I hear words like we need to be simple, we need to be defensible, we need to be dependable, we need to be sustainable, and those are all centrally located and based around the tools themselves. But this invites a question of what's the actual criteria when you're evaluating a new partner? And Megan, you alluded to this earlier, that hey, you usually get a really good read based off of the energy and excitement from the sales reps or the point of contact that you're working with from a partner. But in addition, what are those boxes that our partners and the folks joining us today are looking to check when they're actually speaking and meeting with a new technology vendor?
Yeah, I think that's a really complicated question that a lot of people struggle to answer no matter how long you've been in cybersecurity. Because if you're too risk averse, you're only going to go to things in the Gartner quadrant, which at that point can be really expensive because they're very established. And some of them may rest on their laurels. So that might prevent you from ever experiencing the newest thing first. That could allow you to make good relationships or expose your customers to really great tech that solves something very efficiently. And at the same time, if you go towards products that aren't really established, then some of the things we've talked about in the past question can keep you up at night. You know, what happens if this product goes down? You need to have a lot of trust if you're using new products, which the last question kind of covered, because if they are weaker than you or they come down, then you can go down with them. So I think it's about doing a balance, and that's where I think that it's really important to have someone really technical on your team who has done security. If you're going to offer security, I think it's critical to have some people on your team who've done it for a really long time, who are technical and maybe have a dev background. I don't think that you have to, but that is the way I go about doing things so that I feel really solid about approaches, because things can sound really good, but if you don't dig into the tool and really put it to the test, even demo it inside your company, use it on yourself, or use it on if you have a few customers that love new tools and they don't mind inconvenience to tinker with something, that can be really helpful. So that in a nutshell is our approach, is trying to blend really established tools with cutting edge tools. But if you're going to use the cutting edge tools that are brand new, I mean, established tools can be cutting edge in functionality. I mean, cutting edge in terms of like brand new or a new concept. Meeting the founders of that tool, talking to them, knowing their dev background, doing a security review on them, and then using the tool are usually mandatory before we would even think of using something. So our customers will not be exposed to tools until we have used them for a couple of months. We won't even bring it up to them. We won't bring it to their attention because they shouldn't have to worry about it. And then they're delighted when we bring them something cool because we have already established that it's really comfortable. And then with the established tools, it's everything we've talked about in this webinar. It's all about value.
There's a couple things here. Totally agree. The value is the clear statement, and the other end of that fulcrum is risk. And so when we think about what I typically recommend people look for what I refer to as risk symmetry, which is you shouldn't really take on more risk unless there's such amazing value in a product that you're acquiring, to put the business at additional risk for the sake of it. As a provider, your job is absolutely not to take on more risk. So it's really definitely at odds with trying to figure out new technology stacks and things like this. However, capabilities are also sellable as a service provider. And so you've really got to do your diligence to fit in how does that mitigate risk. And then also, like Megan said, vendor review is critical, right? There are a lot of people who are unsure how to do vendor reviews, right? Well, I don't have a SOC 2 Type 2, or I don't have ISO 27001, or depending on your risk tolerance for those types of things, there's great ways to get down to the details. So where Megan brings a technical person, which is a great approach to take, get somebody to speak on the same level as somebody you're trying to get the right level of answers for. The Cloud Security Alliance has a great format for the CAIQ or VSA, which are pretty standard ways for vendors to be checked and audited, but also every vendor pretty much fills these out all the time. So they have some pretty patented responses in that sense. So when we think about how to get through the process of vendors, this idea of risk symmetry is a really good one. If a vendor is going to make you weaker, but they offer a capability, that's a risk trade-off you have to make. Don't start there, right? Arrive there by way of eliminating all the other things that you think are going to be relevant to make that. And then the other critical piece is you may say, look, hey, I don't have enough experience here. I'm going to trust somebody, but by trusting somebody, they're going to transfer all that risk to them. That's in a service agreement. It's in a legal contract that's binding. That says basically you guys are accountable for this. By the way, I have a breach retainer, right? And in case something happens, right, you guys are accountable for this. And I have these other people come in and do the work, and you guys will be okay with that. Yes, no. And that's a lot of the way to think about it. If you know for a fact that you don't have the ability to do some of those things, and that's oftentimes why people look for service providers to do it. This is a stock and trade for a service provider. So of course they have a very clear understanding what they can do, what they will do, and also what does it mean for onboarding a new technology partner. So that's if you take 2 words away from this dialogue, it's risk symmetry.
Mm-hmm. And the last thing I'd add to that with risk symmetry is if you're going to take someone's SOC 2, read it. Because just having a SOC 2 is not enough, especially if it's a SOC 2 Type 1. And a SOC 2 Type 1, for people who are new to compliance, you're really allowed to choose your own controls, and there is not a lot of proof of those controls that you need to provide. It's more of a promise that you will do certain things, and not really a stamp of approval on the things that you're doing. So when you're taking risk into your own business, I think it's really important to take someone's SOC report if that's a method that you're choosing to do, but to read the whole thing and then have a discussion with them and maybe ask for additional evidence yourself, not just in reports or diagrams, but look at their tech with them if you're in a position where you can, a newer company. I don't know if I call CrowdStrike and ask to do application security review on them. They might not do that with me since they're a really big company, and I think their point's probably been made. But for some smaller companies and newer technologies, the founder will probably love to do that for you and have no problem really digging in and showing you their safety, because if they really care about their product, they are doing great cybersecurity on their cybersecurity tool too, and they want you to know it. So I'd say in that vendor security review, go deep.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Well, we are heading into just the final few minutes here of our time together. So I do just want to make sure that we are leaving our audience with as much resource and continued learning to take away from today's conversation. Again, I do want to invite any comments or questions for a closing remark for either Megan or Fred from the audience. While those are coming in, I would like to just point out that we've got a lot of stuff cooking over here at JumpCloud, stuff that we are incredibly excited about. Megan, you and I were just speaking the other day about some of these resources and tools. I know that we've got our lounge available, we've got our blogs, our webinars. We've got a lot of different ways to connect. In fact, we just launched our brand new JumpCloud community project, which is a really great way to get all MSPs and MSSPs all together in one environment to share ideas, to talk about either their pain points or celebrate their successes. Megan, I know that we're excited to feature VioletX and a lot of the work and the products that you guys are building in there as well. Not to mention that, everybody's aware of the new buzzword. I think a friend of mine, Tyler Coltes, said that some marketers got their hands on the concept of zero trust, and it is totally blown up and become a very hot topic, a buzzworthy topic these days for our partners. But really, what is it and how to accomplish it is actually a very simple process to follow that we have completely mapped out and made available to our partners and to anybody following along this webinar, which we will absolutely make sure that there is all of the resources and links presented and shared today sent out to all the attendees and the folks that had to leave a little bit early. So with that being said, I do want to dive into, let's see if we've got any questions that have come in. Okay. Well, here's one that I may have missed from earlier, but it's might be a good one to end on. What are some of the hard lessons you have learned throughout your career that might benefit some of those that are maybe in the early stages of development and looking for either that competitive advantage or to make sure that they don't make the same mistakes that their brethren have experienced?
Yeah, I love this question to end on. And my advice of owning an MSSP, we're not really an MSSP, we're a virtual CISO, but in the same family, is that don't focus on your competitors. It can be so hard to see what other people are doing, especially if they're doing big raises with really fancy VCs or, they have big announcements. Focus on your customers. Like, find your customers, listen to them, operate for them, only make choices that are good for them, even if other people who are making a lot of money or raising a ton of money are doing things differently. Stick with what is going to help your customers and make them the best, and everything will be solved 100%. So know what your competitors are doing, see what's happening in the market, talk to your competitors, don't be afraid to call them and just know what's up. But at the end of the day, you are in business to serve other people who are your customers, and they are 99% of what should be in your ear and probably 99% of what you should care about.
Yeah, absolutely. Your customers are your value. Don't misconstrue anything else that you do. And your partners and vendors are your family. Choose wisely when you bring them in.
I love it. Well, fantastic. Megan, thank you so much for joining us. Fred, taking the time and away from a very busy day, a very busy week over here at JumpCloud. I want to thank all of our attendees for joining us today. It's great to have your participation. I do want to remind everyone that we will have this recorded, so that will be available and sent out along with the resources that we just recently covered. If you want to follow VioletX, go ahead and click on LinkedIn. You can go ahead and follow along there. Of course, check them out on the web. They've got a lot of cool automation and virtual products that are coming out. Of course, we're really proud of our partnership with VioletX and the work that we're doing together. And my hope is that whoever the next VioletX is that's out there that's listening and watching this webinar, that they have taken something of value away from our session today, and we can begin assisting them with their next leg and phase of growth. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Really appreciate the time today, And we'll be in touch with you next time for our webinar series, partner-focused webinar series, here brought to you by JumpCloud.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for coming. And if you're my competitor, you can contact me too. I'm happy to brainstorm with anybody.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. We will wrap up today's time, and we'll see you again next time.
Please subscribe and check out more content from us.